Welcome into the Women's Basketball Podcast Holiday Edition. If you're watching this on the OG YouTube page right now, you're probably very confused. Where is Mitchell Northam? Why is Mia in a hotel room? Are you being held hostage? Why are you recording on your AirPods? I think we mentioned it on last week's show, but for those who may have missed it, I am wrapping up a lovely 5-day stay here at Circa Casino and Resort as part of my daily radio show, Helmets and Heels on 1010XL in Jacksonville. Covered the Jacksonville Jaguars game Sunday, unfortunately, against the Las Vegas Raiders. The Travis Hunter Bowl, as many are calling it, won by the home team, the Raiders, 19-14. But I digress. You're here for your one-stop shop for all things women's basketball, whether that be college, WNBA. It's a heavy dose, needless to say, of the college game today. And we wanted to make sure we got you guys a podcast during this 2-week holiday limbo of sorts. And so before we head off on vacation, not only will I give you my musings, our her of the week, our news and notes, our starting five, and so much more, but Mitchell Northam has a very special guest that he will be joined by me here momentarily, and you will get a chance to hear from that special guest who was part of an upset of one of our favorite teams here on the Women's Basketball Podcast. As we do each and every week, though, let us begin with our her of the week. This one's tough because I feel like we could give it to her a lot of weeks, but make no question about it. Juju Watkins finally wins the big one, folks. USC avenges their Elite Eight loss to the UConn Huskies. Juju drops 25 points, 6 boards, 5 assists, 3 blocks, was 9 of 16 from the floor. Absolutely dominant in a marquee showcase that was nationally televised. And of course, going up against who many believe will be the number 1 overall pick in this upcoming WNBA draft in Paige Beckers. And so I don't want to say that we've now used our Juju mulligan, but I feel like there was no better time than this one. I'm not going to lie with you guys. And when we start our starting five, I'm going to bring this up and we'll lead with this. That game here in Vegas was a 5.5-point line favoring the perennial powerhouse in the Huskies. And myself, so many others, I should have just consulted Mitchell Northam, Making Money with Mitch, which we will have at the end of today's episode, and probably rode with USC. But as I said on last week's program, this was a pseudo home game for UConn in Hartford at the Excel Center. Their logo was at midcourt. It's an impressive victory for Lindsey Gottlieb. I think it says a lot about Juju and this USC team. At the last time we saw them in a marquee game, they got run out of their own gym. And quite frankly, they looked like a two-headed monster, yes, between Juju and Kiki Arifan. But at the same time, they had nobody else. They had no other answers. I still think that ultimately this is a roster that if you don't have Juju Watkins and Kiki operating at peak efficiency, you are going to run into some problems. But at the same time, that's what makes her one of, if not the best player in the country right now, although I think we've made note that Hannah Hidalgo will have something to say about that. It's not just a two monster race between Paige Beckers and Juju Watkins at this juncture. So we're gonna use our Juju mulligan. I don't think we're gonna use it again because there's so much great women's college basketball going on right now. But again, a shout out to Juju Watkins, this week's her of the week here at the Women's Basketball Podcast. I alluded to it, so let's do it. More on the USC win over UConn. Folks, I regret to inform you, I went to 12 different casinos during my 5-day stay here in Las Vegas. That was the only game in women's college basketball, a loaded slate this weekend, and we're going to run through a bunch of these games. That was the only game at the sports books that you were able to gamble on. And that, my friends, was absolutely shocking to me. Knowing the growth of this game, knowing that, as we're going to get to here in just a second, I mean, the Big 12 right now is an absolute free. I mean, it's open season. It could be anybody's game. Ditto to the Big East. Ditto to the Big 10, quite frankly, outside of those two California powerhouses, which we'll also circle back to. I was very surprised that was the only game you could bet on, although it certainly was a top 10 showdown. It's marquee names, but I was very surprised that was the only game. And again, it was a 5.5-point line favoring the pseudo home team, the UConn Huskies. I took the bait. Sorry, folks. At least I made money with UNC men's basketball. That's a story for another time. Let's kick it over to number 2 in this week's starting five, and we will keep it with my anecdotes from this excursion here out to the desert. I searched high and far and wide to try to find Las Vegas Aces gear. I know they don't regularly play at the T-Mobile Center. I did go to T-Mobile for Saturday night's Seattle Kraken Las Vegas Golden Knights game. I was optimistic maybe, possibly even just a street vendor might have an Asia Wilson jersey that I perhaps could buy. even in the airport, which I'm set to go back to here in a couple of hours. I was optimistic, even dreary as I was when we arrived at midnight on Thursday night. We might be able to find some sort of Aces gear, something that I could bring home. None. And I know part of it is it's December. It's hockey season out here in Las Vegas. It's football season. But Las Vegas, please do better, because I understand you did not win the WNBA title this past season, but technically you still have won 2 of the last 3. So I was a little disappointed. Again, we didn't actually go out and see the arena that they play in regularly, but still, I was hoping for more Aces pride. Maybe if we come back at some point during the summer, then we will actually get to see the Aces fever on full display. Of course, I had to bring the Indiana fever into this, folks. Come on. This is the Women's Basketball Podcast, and I am Nia O'Brien after all. Back to the women's college basketball front. Speaking of bets that myself and Mitchell Northam have made on this podcast that are looking mighty fine right now, our Infinity Stones that we picked out about 3-4 weeks ago for the Calgorithm, the Cal Bears, and Georgia Tech, set to become a top 10 team in the AP Top 25. I don't know, I'm looking at my clock right now, Pacific Coast time versus East Coast time, what time that's actually going to come out. I think, quite frankly, you could see Georgia Tech in the top 10, either this week or next week. The Yellow Jackets with another impressive victory, this one over 23rd ranked Nebraska, who we will also get to here in just a second. That is perhaps, in my estimation, when you look at Georgia Tech right now and the season that they've had, I obviously was very high on Amy and the program that she's built out there in Lincoln. But outside of the North Carolina win, this is the second, and the Oregon win as well. This is the second best win that Georgia Tech has on its schedule. And that's saying something when you also consider they played the likes of South Dakota State, Mississippi State. The list goes on. That, I think it's as impressive a start to a season as we've seen. I, again, want to give kudos to Cal, who won the Raising the Bar Invitational. They're now 12-1. They did beat my sister's alma mater, the Fordham Rams. Let's get Rams. They also beat Temple, 2 decent mid-major outfits. Fordham and Temple both have 6 wins on the season. I do think both those teams are trending not just in the right direction, but they're trending in that top 10, top 15 direction. So shout out to Mitchell Northam for getting this podcast on the train early for the Bears and the Yellow Jackets. Another storyline, we'll call it a storyline as we get to number 4 in this week's starting 5, the Big 12. I am very worried about our friends in Ames, Iowa, folks. And not just because, yes, I certainly have an affinity to the folks in Iowa City, but I enjoyed my time covering Bill Fenley and the Iowa State women's basketball program as well. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Audi Crooks was an All-American as a freshman. She's going to be on an All-American team this year. But Iowa State's in trouble. They dropped this one 81-75. I watched this game from one of the sports books here in Vegas on Saturday night to Oklahoma State in Stillwater. Audi Crooks, yes, drops 28 points in 32 minutes. She's 12 of 18 from the floor. So at the very least, comparatively speaking to some of their other recent games, she actually was able to get a couple shots off and obviously shoot at a good clip. But besides her 28 points, yes, you get 15 from Addie Brown. Yes, you get 12 from Sydney Harris. 6 points from Emily Ryan's not going to cut it. And I don't know where the scoring's going to come from. Bill's going 9-10 deep. He's trying to rotate in different pieces, and it's just not there right now for the Cyclones, who, don't get me wrong, they're 9-5, and they've had a murderer's row. I don't envy anyone that has to play UConn and South Carolina in the same season, let alone having to play an annual rivalry game with Iowa. I don't really know what to make of Oklahoma State at this juncture. Certainly the loss to Northern Iowa in Cedar Falls looms large. Maya McDermott and Tanya Warren have a nice little squad up there, but at the same time, I mean, it's, the 5th leading scorer in the nation, and she drops 30 plus on you. But you're Iowa State. That shouldn't be happening. And so as I look at the Big 12 standings, I think a lot of my concern for the Cyclones, not that I don't think they're going to make the tournament, because they're going to make the tournament, but I think my concern lies akin to, and we'll get to the Big 10 here in just a second, with the depth of this conference, because I obviously also bought a lot of Infinity Stones when it came to Ayoka Lee and Kansas State. Haley Van Lith has defied everyone's expectations. Very happy for her, as we've noted a time or two on this podcast. Oklahoma State is technically in 3rd at 11-1 in the conference. So maybe it's not as awful a loss on paper as I want it to be for the Cyclones. But up to this point, the best win on Oklahoma State's schedule was Arkansas, who is in a bit of a reloading state. And what? Houston Christian? and their one loss is to one of our favorite mid-majors in Richmond. But this is a team that had only played one Power Four opponent up to this point. And so, yes, they're in third. You can talk about it being a merchant, whatever standings. But I've got concerns there. Baylor is 11-2. They're going to be in the picture. Colorado picked up a massive upset win over West Virginia, who we talked about last week, 14th and perhaps one of the quieter big starts to the season of any team in the country. You factor in Kansas and Utah, who are going to be in the mix. And even if they're not necessarily perennial powers in the Big 12 this season, like they have been in years past, Kansas was competitive with Iowa. Utah's going to find its way even without Lynn Roberts at the helm. I just listed off 6-7 teams, and that's before I got to Iowa State, who currently is fourth from the bottom in this conference. And so I am a little concerned about the Cyclones. Again, 9-5, have had arguably one of the most difficult strength of schedules of anybody, but I'm a little concerned because if you can't get shots off for Audi Crooks, you need Emily Ryan to step up. You need the 3-point shooting to be there because it hasn't been. And I am a little concerned about where Iowa State goes from here in an absolutely loaded Big 12 conference. Let's round out this week's starting five by looking at the Big 10 and looking ahead to next weekend. I'm recording this on Monday, the 23rd. Again, because of the holiday break, we won't have a ton of games during the week. That's why we're kind of doing a 2-for-1 episode here on the Women's Basketball Podcast. The Big 10 next week, folks. Get ready for this. The 3 games that I will have my eye on. Don't worry, Mitchell Northam will be here momentarily to set the chef's table, give you a primer for the week ahead, as well as making money with Mitch. But the 3 games that I will absolutely have my eye on. Michigan State at Maryland. The Spartans are coming off of their first loss of the season to Alabama. Perhaps a little surprising. The SEC homers, I'm sure, are going to parade around with this because now they can't complain about the college football playoff. I think that it's going to be a massive game in College Park because Brenda Freese is still out here trying to prove with the chip on her shoulder, even with a national title to her name. It's approaching 20 years from now. So, people are questioning Maryland still, which I don't know why. Very excited for that matchup next weekend. And here's the other 2 that I'll have my eye on. Big 10 matchups. Nebraska at UCLA. Michigan at USC. I literally wrote LOL in my notes. If you're listening to this in Southern California, please go out to these games. Please go out to Pauley Pavilion. Please get on the campus of USC because I think that this Michigan team we've talked about with its 3-headed freshman trio that had just been awesome. I think that's going to be an exciting matchup with Juju. Plus, you'll have that question of, hey, are they still riding the high of UConn? Will they perhaps take a step back down to earth? After all, their one loss to Notre Dame did come in their home gym. And then Nebraska at UCLA, I alluded to Nebraska and the result against Georgia Tech. And so I think that they are absolutely going to come out firing. Would love to see, UCLA at least be challenged because Creighton really didn't give them much of a challenge in their final game before the Christmas break. And I want to see a team actually push UCLA to the brink because we've talked about it before on this podcast, and I'll continue to say it. I don't want to call them front runners because I believe what Corey Close has been able to do is develop more of a mindset where it's not just, hey, when things are going good, that's when our offense is flowing. And perhaps when we actually have to play from behind, that's where we struggle, as was documented in the ESPN Plus series last year surrounding Kiki Rice, because that popped up a time or two, especially when the calendar flipped to January last year. And yes, they were without Lauren Betts then. So I am very excited for those 3 games in the Big Ten, as well as all that's to come here during this holiday break. I know it's going to be kind of a weird few days because the NFL has to dominate the calendar, but we will have women's college basketball on the other side. All right, I alluded to it. Mitchell Northam joins us next. He has a very special guest. They're going to be documenting perhaps the game of the week.
Joining us now on the Women's Basketball Podcast, fresh off an upset win over the 9th-ranked Duke Blue Devils, is South Florida Bulls graduate guard Sammi Puisis. Sammi, welcome to the show, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Let's start off with that win over Duke from this past Saturday. You all jumped out to a big 20-6 lead early and then hung on late for that 65-56 victory. What was the key to the hot start for you guys?
Yeah, we definitely came out going. We knew we needed to play really good defense and rebound. A lot of their shots were second chance opportunities, so we needed to take those away from them. And then just kind of run the clock, run our offense, make them defend multiple actions, and just for us to take good quality shots.
Yeah. You finished that game as the leading scorer, 23 points on 6 of 9 shooting. What was working for you in particular against Duke?
Credit to Duke. They made me take tough shots. I had to, put it on the floor a little bit more. They were, finding me. I wasn't getting wide open threes, but I would just say just trying to be aggressive, not rush. Finding my teammates. I was coming off ball screens and they're hard hedging, so just looking at my post players, feeding them the ball. So yeah.
Yeah. I was looking at your schedule a little bit. You guys are 7-6 this season, but none of your losses are to bad teams. You played UConn, Vanderbilt, South Carolina, TCU. These are all teams that are going to make the NCAA tournament, more than likely. Y'all are 11th in the country in strength of schedule this season, so really tough slate. When y'all as players got your schedule before the season started, what was the reaction? Was it like, whoa, this is going to be tough, or is it just like, all right, we're ready for this challenge, or a little bit of mix of both?
I expected it. Coach Jose always plays a tough non-conference schedule. For me personally, I'm excited. These are the types of games I want to play. I want to play the best. I want to see how I compare to the best. Um, but yeah, I mean, they're gonna show us all of our weaknesses. It's gonna be a challenge every night, and it just feels good to get this win because I know we are a great team, and our record doesn't really show that. But we playing all these teams coming up to the Duke game. It really prepared us for this, and I really think that's why like we're really getting better, and we were able to get this top 10 win.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I looked at the spread before the Duke game, and I was like, no, I like South Florida to make this a close one. And so, yeah, thanks for proving me right, I guess. With you mentioned that tough schedule kind of showed you your weaknesses and allowed you to fix some things. With non-conference play over now for y'all, what have you learned about this team?
I think we have a lot of different strengths. It can be anybody on a given night. Just really taking what they're giving us and running our offense. Coach Jose puts us through really good plays and offense, and we just need to be who we are more and not play, to the level of some of the teams we've played, or just be us because we have a really good, we have good offense and a lot of good players and anybody can be the leading scorer that night.
Yeah. One of the big kind of high profile off season additions for you guys was getting Mama Dembele as a transfer. What has she added to this team? What kind of dynamic has she brought?
She makes us go. She's quick. She gets a lot of steals on defense. That translates to offense. But yeah, she pushes the tempo. Really good passer, driving in the lane and kicking out to people. So it definitely gives us energy. She was definitely a great addition. So yeah, but again, we had a lot of new faces, pretty new team. So beginning of the season, we're still finding, learning how to play with one another. I was coming off an injury, so I think the pieces are now coming together.
Yeah, do you feel like I mean, playing that tough slate kind of forced you guys to figure it out quickly?
For sure, yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned your injury. I know you missed, pretty much all of last season with that knee. Before that, you were one of the best 3-point shooters in the country. You were fifth nationally in threes made per game in the 22-23 season. This year, you're shooting a career best 44% from behind the arc. What was your rehab from that knee injury like, and how did you keep your shooting touch so sharp during that time?
Mhm. The ACL meniscus, it's a tough injury. You're out a long time. I think I was able to get more shots up than I have ever, just because that's all I could do for the longest time until I was able to start running and cutting and doing all of that. So I think I really perfected my shot. And I've been the strongest I've ever been. Like my legs, arms, everything. I've been able to get in the weight room a lot in this off season. So I just think I'm feeling good, and I get shots up all the time. So, but it was a long rehab. I thank God every day for being able to play again. after it. But so yeah, I'm just grateful that I'm able to play again. It's been really, really fun.
Yeah, it's been fun to watch you and see you back out there on the court. And I know that your teammates are happy to have you back too, knocking down some shots from deep range. This is your sixth year of college basketball. You know, you had the COVID year and the medical red shirt for your knee. You were at Florida State before you went to USF. I'm kind of curious, you know, for you, what was it about South Florida that made you want to go there in the first place? And then, you know, over the past 3 years, a lot of players have transferred, you know, one, two, three, you know, more times. What's kept you there with Coach Jose for these past 3 seasons, and what makes USF special for you?
Yeah. I think USF was just a really good fit because of who Coach Jose was. The first time I talked to him on the phone, he really um, convinced me that he'll put me in the right positions for me to be successful as a shooter. And developing my game in the off season, allowing me to be more than just a 3-point shooter, you know, taking it off the bounce, posting people up, just showing all aspects of my game. So we really like built a trust from day one. And as soon as I got in the gym with him, like I really did improve. And my first year at USF was my most successful year in college. And we play great teams. And I've never played with international players before, so that was really fun. Um, but it's just a good group of girls, and I love all the staff members. So yeah, it's just been a really good fit for me.
Yeah, for sure. I know, you know, the preseason might have been kind of hard for you guys because of the hurricane that came and how that affected, you know, that South Florida community there in Tampa. You know, what was that time like? And do you feel like you you're maybe, you know, is the city kind of rallying around y'all now, you know, that now that you're playing and, you know, kind of giving people something to cheer for?
hmm During the hurricanes, it was a little tough. You know, we weren't able to practice for a while, but we tried to give back to, you know, the city of Tampa. They got a lot more damage than we did not practicing. And um, but yeah, I would say not getting this win, I think, you know, Tampa's gonna rally around a little bit more. But yeah, we're just glad we made it through, and we're helping with community service and anything we can do for the city of Tampa.
Yeah. Going through, I mean, this tough non-conference slate, it had to be a little, you know, validating probably to get a win over one of these ranked teams, right?
Yeah, especially like going into conference gives us a little boost going in. But yeah, we there were so many games we feel like we should have won and we didn't. So to finally get this one, you know, it shows us we're getting better, we're starting to click, and it's a good energy booster going into conference.
Was there like a moment in one of those earlier games, you know, at Mississippi State or Louisville, you know, those are some of the tough, you know, close losses that you had where, you know, you guys maybe made a mistake and you're like, okay, we can't do that again, and you fixed it against Duke?
Yeah, I would say it's a combination of all the losses we had. We really got in the film room as a team, small groups, individually, trying to, because a lot of the mistakes are unforced on our end, and those are the things we can fix and get better. And we've had some tough practices. So yeah, it all translated to the into the Duke game.
Yeah. If you were you know, talking to you know, somebody who is new to women's college basketball and you wanted to make a pitch to them as to why they should watch South Florida in the second half of the season, what would you say to them? What would get fans excited about South Florida? Why should folks watch y'all?
I would just say that this is a fun group of girls. We all have so much love for each other, more than any other team I've played with. So we're out there playing for each other. It's a lot of joy, and everybody, like I said, anybody could be a leading scorer. We have so many different weapons. Um, and yeah, it's just we have a great coach. We're always, you know, running great things on offense. So it's really fun.
Cool. Well, you guys have another nationally televised game coming up for our listeners. You play on ESPN2 at Rice to open American Athletic Conference play on December 29th. That's at 1 p.m. Eastern. I'm going to try and see you all in January when you come to East Carolina, which is just a short drive away from me. So, yeah, best of luck to you and the Bulls the rest of the way, and congrats to y'all on the win over Duke. And thanks for joining us. We super
Thank you
appreciate
so
it.
much. Appreciate it.
Before we jump into making money with Mitch, I just have a couple thoughts that I want to get off on some games that I watched over the weekend and over last week. Last Tuesday, I went and saw North Carolina smack Florida at the Jumpman Invitational in Charlotte. The game was never really in question. I just have a few quick takeaways on that one. First, UNC's defense is totally legit and probably one of the best in the country. They held Florida to a season low in points, 57, a season worst field goal percentage, 31%, and forced them into 20 turnovers. 9 of UNC's 14 opponents this season have had their lowest scoring totals against the Tar Heels, which is kind of wild and just a really incredible stat. The Tar Heels also rank 8th in points allowed per game, 52.1, 13th in per hoop stats defensive rating, and they are 9th in 3-point defense. When your defense is that good, that consistently, you can beat anyone. Second, I think we're beginning to see a better and more assertive version of Maria Gokdang. She had 14 points and 8 rebounds against a Florida defense that was big and very physical with her. I was on the floor behind the baseline taking photos, and you could really tell how hard Maria was working. I think when we get into ACC play, you're going to see her take advantage of smaller front courts and put up some impressive numbers. Finally, as I've said on the show before, you're going to see a lot of Lainey Grant highlights over the next 4 years, and we're beginning to see her be more consistent and more confident. She had 13 points against Florida, 15 points against Norfolk State, making a combined 7 of 13 three-pointers in those games. She's had her ups and downs, as any 17-year-old freshman would, against the kind of opponents that North Carolina has played. But like I said, we're beginning to see her be more decisive and more confident. She's shooting 44% from three-point land on the season, which is simply something that North Carolina has not had recently, a player off the bench who can shoot it that well. I mean, Courtney Banghart didn't even have a scholarship guard off the bench in the final 8 games of last season, much less someone as talented as Lainey Grant. So with all that said, with non-conference play over and seeing what I saw, a UNC team that has now comfortably beaten 2 SEC teams, a Big Ten team, and a Big East team, this is a group of Tar Heels that should finish in the top 4 of the ACC and host NCAA tournament games this year, barring any injuries, of course. They have the talent, they have the depth, and they have the defense to do so. Quickly on UConn USC, this game absolutely lived up to the hype. I loved seeing Juju Watkins not back down from Paige Beckers, blocking her shot and scoring on the other end in that one sequence. I also loved Paige not backing down from Juju, draining that 3 in her face and then staring her down. That sort of stardom, mano-y-mano, is what we really want in women's college basketball. Paige versus Juju totally lived up to the hype. Fans were not disappointed. This is we loved watching Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese battle, and I think if we're lucky, we're going to see a part 3 of Paige versus Juju again in March, if we're lucky. There's a lot of football on Saturday, but this was one of the best and most competitive games out there on any television. A 72-70 win for USC that puts them back in the conversation for being a national title contender. This was Juju at her very best, 25 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, and 3 blocks against a major opponent on the road. And I think we saw the front court partnership between Kiki Iriafen and Rhea Marshall at its best too, as they combined for 22 points, 20 rebounds, 8 assists, and 2 blocks. For UConn, the positive is that you have Sarah Strong and Paige Beckers, and those 2 players can take you a long way. But without a healthy AZ Fudd, you need other players to step up. Beckers and Strong were the only players to score in double figures. And those 2 can erase a lot of mistakes, but in games like this against elite opponents, they can also only take you so far. 2 other concerns I have for UConn as they enter the new year, rebounding and 3-point defense. Again, on the board, Sarah Strong did her job. She grabbed 13 rebounds. No other player for UConn had more than 3. In a 2-point loss, a few more rebounds, though, means a few more possessions, which could have swung this thing the other way for the Huskies. UConn is 247th nationally in offensive rebounding, which is absolutely terrible, horrible, abysmal, whatever adjective you want to use. Also atrocious for UConn is their three-point shooting defense. The Huskies allow opponents to make 34% of their shots from deep this season, which ranks 286th nationally. Again, that's not good. That's not what you want. If you're a Huskies fan, that's not what you want if you're a UConn team that has aspirations of winning a national championship. USC torched UConn from deep, making 9 of 16 from behind the arc for a 56% clip. If UConn wants to go far in March, they have to fix those two things, and they have to figure out the depth issue, or just hope and pray that AZ Fudd gets healthy and that Paige Beckers and Sarah Strong continue to play like two of the best players in the country. All right, let's go to making money with Mitch. Last week, we went 1-2, not exactly what we wanted, but we're 6-6 on the year, so we're at 500, so we're breaking even. Here's the 3 games that I got for everybody for this coming weekend. All of these games are on Sunday, December 29th, after the holiday break. So on Sunday, you can settle in and check out some of these and maybe even bet on them if you want. First up, we have number 19 Michigan State at number 8 Maryland. This is on Big Ten Plus at 1 p.m. Eastern on Sunday. I'm seeing Maryland as a 3.5-point favorite, and I like Maryland to cover that. I like Maryland to win and to cover that. I think this is probably the best game on Sunday. Maryland is still undefeated. We just saw Michigan State get beat by Alabama. I think Maryland is just a little bit better. This is probably going to be a tightly contested, close game. But I like the Terps to, win by a couple, win by 5. I just think they're really deep and they're really talented this year. So they should open Big Ten play here with a bang and get a W at home. Number 17, North Carolina at Miami, also on Sunday, 4 p.m. Eastern, ACC Network. I'm seeing North Carolina as a 5.5-point road favorite. I like that. I like the Tar Heels as a 5.5-point favorite at Miami. So to cover that and win, Miami is 11-1 this year, but I think their record is a little fugazi, to be honest with you. Their best win is probably at Florida, where they won by 10 points. And I just saw this North Carolina team beat Florida by 20. Miami also needed overtime to beat Quinnipiac. Quinnipiac's a good mid-major team, but and I'm looking at the rest of Miami's schedule, and I'm not really seeing a whole lot that I should be impressed by. They just beat Oregon State on a neutral court. They only beat Pitt by 6 to open ACC play, and they lost to Vanderbilt by 18 points. So again, for all the reasons that I just mentioned earlier, I think North Carolina is an elite team this year, a really good defensive team. I think that they should be able to go down to Miami and beat the Canes in their own house. Last game up for y'all here. Number 23 Michigan at number 4 USC. This is Sunday night, 10 p.m. Eastern on the Big Ten Network. I'm seeing USC favored by 6.5. Michigan is ranked. I think Michigan is decent this season. They've got a good team. But I think USC is just a whole lot better. And USC has the momentum now. They're feeling good after beating UConn. I think they're going to start Big Ten play 2-0 and do so pretty comfortably. So for them to win and cover 6.5 points, I think is a smart play. So that's our making money with Mitch this week. Maryland to cover 3.5 over Michigan State, North Carolina to cover 5.5 over Miami, and USC to cover 6.5 over Michigan. Happy holidays, y'all, and deuces.